My name is Oriana Noel Lewis. I'm a master's in social work candidate with the University of Washington Tacoma Social Work and Criminal Justice Program. This is my Thurston County Area Law Enforcement Health and Wellness Program capstone project. My first gratitudes go to Dr. Anandita Bhattacharya, who supported my efforts in this direction, along with all my other professors who supported me focusing my academic efforts on law enforcement health and wellness over the last several years. Additionally, I have many law enforcement officers who've let me come alongside them, in particular Lakewood Police Department, Chief Unfred and Investigator Joel Pettit, who welcomed me and as a field placement with Lakewood PD. Additionally, there are the cities of Olympia, Tumwater, Yelm, Tenino, Lacey, who have all welcomed me on scene and in their cars as I've ridden along with them to learn about what they do and how they do what they do. In particular, I am deeply grateful to the Thurston County Sheriff's Office and Lieutenant Carla Carter and Sergeant Rod Dietrich, members of the crisis negotiation team and the peer support team, who've allowed me the opportunity to train alongside them, learn with them, and support on-scene efforts. And all of the deputies who've given me a ride as I've had the opportunity to sit alongside them on scene and responding to calls and through hours of shifts, who've taught me so much about law enforcement and the citizenry that they serve and how we can be of deepest support to your health and wellness. Thank you. The intervention I'm offering is focused on the Thurston County area because that has been my home for the last 20 years. And in my time of being a social worker in the area, long before I went to school for it, I recognized that our law enforcement deserves stress and trauma processing to be part of their job duties, and that trauma and stress processing needs to be supported by their agencies and ongoing practices and the citizenry that surrounds them. Law enforcement is deemed one of the most stressful occupations, and by its nature, it has high stress, danger, violence, and constant hypervigilance as part of the way that the job is done. Law enforcement officers are, of course, a very resilient population, but it is recognized that they not only have a life expectancy that's 21 years sooner than the general population that they pass, but also they screen higher for post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and depression. And those are all inevitable and normal responses to the exposure to tragedy, stress, and trauma. Trauma is the recognition that within a 6-month period, law enforcement officers are exposed to at least 3 events where they thought they would die or they witnessed somebody else thinking they would die, and or have horror be a part of what it is that they're experiencing. And therefore, their law enforcement necessarily deserve opportunity for trauma stewardship and holistic healing to be provided, supported, and utilized for them. My experience that I want to share in sitting reminds me of sitting with a deputy, and we were in a very rural part of the county and driving around at night and talking about some of the things that he had seen and experienced. And he was telling me about how after a particularly gruesome homicide scene that he was on, he found himself not sleeping well, feeling distance from his children, and having a sense that there was a hopelessness to the world when people could treat other people with so much hate and disdain. In the process of talking with him, one of the things I was able to offer was how normal those responses are when witnessing trauma. The other piece that we discussed was what are all the things that bring him hope and joy in life? Not only that, but how could he deliberately and planfully connect to those things? The other piece is that most law enforcement officers don't talk with people about the things that they see. It's a great way to end social connection at any given dinner party, to bring up the gruesomeness and hatred and hurt that you see on a daily basis as a law enforcement officer. So one of the things I deliberately let him know was how available I was to hear non-judgmentally about whatever it is he was experiencing and witnessing, as well as keeping the door open for future conversations. One of the ways that we know that stress and trauma gets processed is you can tell the story 20 times to one person or to 20 different people. And many law enforcement officers don't have the social support network to tell 20 different people, but they certainly can be provided at least one trusting person, if not supporting their efforts to connect with many other people to share what it is that they're witnessing and experiencing. So my intervention calls for the job descriptions for Thurston County area deputy sheriff and city law enforcement officers to be revised to include a recognition that stress and trauma processing can be a normative part of their duties. City and county policy will need to be revised to recognize that and directly address the health and well-being needs of law enforcement officers. And an indicator that this is working is that if by 2023, 100% of all job descriptions included duty to engage in on-duty stress and trauma processing, then that necessarily means that the agencies that they work for and region area support services would be providing those. If by 2024, 100% of commissioned Thurston County area law enforcement staff state that stress and trauma processing is a normative part of their job duties, we will know that we've been successful. The second part of the intervention is recognizing that an activity to begin the next 2-year pilot project would be to have 2-day-long trainings on health and wellness through stress and trauma processing for law enforcement, and that will necessarily mean cultivating rapport between mental health providers and at least 3 sergeant level law enforcement leaders. And the idea would be to have 2 years to provide prevention, intervention, and retention efforts for law enforcement. And that there are a variety of tactical, mental, physical, spiritual, social, and financial supports that are in support of that. If by the end of 2023, Thurston County area mental health providers indicate that they have an increased familiarity of the needs of law enforcement and that they are available and willing to provide services, that will be an indicator of success. In 2020, I conducted a research project on the familiarity with law enforcement mental health scale, and 36 Thurston County area mental health providers responded, saying that they believed that law enforcement officers needed their support and their services, but that they were unwilling and unavailable to provide those. I would suggest that a more rapport building among mental health providers and law enforcement officers could shift that. And so if through this 2-day-long training and this 2-year pilot project, Thurston County area commission law enforcement staff report receiving culturally relevant and job-specific stress and trauma processing from local mental health providers, and that could be in the format of cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure-based therapy, EMDR, yoga, financial wellness, holistic healing opportunities, whether that's through acupuncture and chiropractic care, as well as social opportunities for people to engage with not only law enforcement, but their families and have supported areas. The idea would be that the goal could be met, that all Thurston County area law enforcement staff indicate that their health and wellness is directly and deliberately supported by the citizenry they serve. If that could be offered, we will find that our law enforcement could more likely provide services the way that we are calling and inviting them to do, with more deliberate presence, health and well-being, and that the next time any of us call 911, that the most capable, available, present law enforcement officer shows up on scene. I look forward to being a part of that vision, and thank you for your time and your attention. I'm looking forward to serving however I can.